everyone, it's Lexi. In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you some of my top fall reads that I like to read at this time of year. So as you can see outside, it's a dreary fall day. I just got back from my morning class and it was like, I wasn't really like sleet, but it's like in the transition between like freezing rain and sleet, so it's not a really fun day outside. So when it's like this type of weather, I like to stay and read like cozy books and just some maybe spooky fall things or kind of the atmosphere of it. Yeah, so without further ado, let's get started. So to start out, this first book that I recommend is In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware, and I just finished this a couple weeks ago. It follows a girl named Nora who out of the blue gets asked to her best friend from like high school's bridal shower, and she ends up like she hasn't been in contact with this friend for like 10 years, so it's really weird. So she decides to go with one of her other friends now, Nina, and they end up going to this secluded cabin that's out in the middle of nowhere. But this cabin is like a glass like fishbowl. It's whole thing, it's made out of glass, so you can see in. And mysteriously something bad happens. We know in the beginning of the book that Nora wakes up at a hospital and she's having a hard time remembering what happened. So it just kind of falls about that, and she slowly pieces together what actually happened that night. And so yeah, this book was really spooky, and it takes place in like kind of fall transitioning to winter, where it's starting to snow and it's cold and it's like spooky outside, I guess, like just really dreary out. So this was a really good book. I really liked it. So if you're looking for something that has like that fall, cold, brisk feeling, like atmosphere, then I highly recommend that you check this book out. So next I have The Bone Garden by Tess, Gerritsen, and this is a book that I also read this month that I really liked, and it follows two parallel stories. It follows a girl, present day, named Julie, who buys this old house that's over 200 years old, and she's kind of fixing up the garden, and she finds this body buried in the backyard that anthropologists think is dates back to the early mid 1800s. And so this story kind of follows Julie, who kind of discovers it, and then it flashes back to the 1830s, where there's been a series of murders that have been taking place and all that spooky stuff. And the way, like, Tess Gerritsen is probably one of my favorite authors of all time. And like the way she describes Boston during this time with like the fog and how it's slowly like kind of the end of fall as well, it kind of had that spooky like feeling to it, and I could perfectly picture it in my mind even though I've never been to Boston. But yeah, so I was really kind of, this book was really good to read when it's like cold outside and you're nice and cozy and it's spooky, so I highly recommend that you check this book out. It is really good. So next, like also kind of the beginning of fall, I always think of starting the school year, and so this is like a series that I always kind of associate with fall and like new beginnings and all that, especially when it comes to school, and it is the Gallagher Girls series by Ali Carter. And I read this book starting in middle school. I think I started reading it, and it is one of my favorite series. I want to go back and reread them actually, but they follow a group of girls who go to a spy school, and the first book is kind of like the first Harry Potter, where it's like, you know, it at least trickles to what's eventually going to happen later on in the book. So that's really nice, and I really like it because it revolves around female friendships and all that fun stuff. So I don't know, whenever I think of the beginning of school and like fall and like the leaves changing and the excitement around the new school year, these are the books that come to mind. So next is another book that kind of has that warm, toasty feeling that you get when the weather starts to change during fall, and it's The Things We Do for Love by Kristin. This is a book that I read in grade 12, I think, so it's been over 4 years now, and it follows a girl who is a high school student. Her mother, her father's not in the picture, but her mother is kind of like a drunk, and she's working really hard to kind of keep up her scholarship for this high school, and she has plans of going to college, but then one day she finds out that she's pregnant. And then she kind of collides worlds with this woman who's had a lot of miscarriages in her life, so she's kind of struggling with doing with that. Her marriage is kind of crumbling because of that. And this book takes place in Seattle in fall, and obviously it's progresses like 9 months, but it's still like it has that warm, cozy feeling of love and like having like a mother figure and just kind of the sacrifices that people make for love. And I don't know, this has like a warm feeling, and I think this is a good like fall read and all that. So yeah. This next book is a historical fiction book that takes place during fall, and it's What She Left Behind by Ellen Marie Wiseman. And this book is a dual storyline. It follows a present-day girl who is in the foster care system, and her like foster parents are kind of excavating this old insane asylum that was used during the 1920s for women who were kind of shipped off there, and she kind of stumbles upon this story of a girl who kind of was from a rich family, and she was being forced into a marriage that she didn't want to be a part of, and her, as a punishment for that, they send her to an insane asylum, and she gets left there, and all this stuff happens. And it's really interesting to read because how mental health was kind of viewed back then, and how basically doctors can get away with doing anything, which is really scary in terms of that whole dynamic. So it's a really good, interesting read. And then it kind of takes place, the main storyline of not in the present, takes place in fall, and it just has that atmosphere with kind of like a spooky kind of abandoned building and fall, and just kind of the dreariness. So I don't know, this is like a good book to read if you want to be like cozy when it's kind of sad outside like it is out there. So the next book that I have is also one by Tess, and it's Harvest, and I read this earlier in the year, and it follows a resident surgeon named Abby who one day gets stuck on, or she gets involved in a transplant for this heart. And originally this heart was supposed to go to a kid who was at the top of the donor list, and then it ended up getting switched to a rich man's wife. So the surgeon that was higher up decided to give it to the kid instead, and that leads to a lot of fallout within the hospital. But then a heart magically kind of appears for this rich man's wife, and so Abby kind of gets thrown into this world where she's realizing that something is not going right. And this is like a good medical thriller to read at this time of year, where it's kind of dreary outside and like kind of that atmosphere. So this was a really good book. I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, it was a really good book, and if you're looking for a good thriller to read kind of around this time of year, I highly recommend this novel. So next is the third book in the Cormoran Strike series, and it is Career of Evil by Robert Galbraith, and this is the third kind of installment in J.K. Rowling's pseudonym like murder mystery series, and this was my favorite by far. Just the way I don't want to give too much away about the plot, but like if you have read the first two books and you're kind of iffy about it, I highly recommend that you like stick through the third book. The third book was, you could tell, was like what J.K. Rowling was trying to get to the whole time, and it takes place in London, and just kind of the atmosphere and how it's dreary outside, and it does take place in winter, but it's a good thing, like especially now that the weather is changing and it's getting darker outside, so you can kind of feel that environment around you. And it was the two main characters, there's so much character development and growth, and just the ending of this book was just like, oh my god. So if you are kind of hesitant to start this series, I recommend you push through the first two books, because the third book is amazing. So lastly, this book is one that came out a few weeks ago, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm super excited to. And Harry Potter is just like a book that you can read like all the time, like every single season, like every occasion. So this book in particular, just because it came out recently, it's the illustrated edition of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I'm specifically referring to this edition of it just because it's a new kind of reading experience. They did such a good job with the Philosopher's Stone, the illustrated edition, but like the illustrations in here are just beautiful. Like you can tell that they put a lot of effort into making these books really nice. So yeah, this will just be good. And I don't know, I always get a Halloween vibe, I think, because I remember being younger and they always would have Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets on Disney Channel. So that's why I always like around Halloween time, so that's what I always associate with. So I don't think I'll be getting to this book this month, but it's a good kind of fall read. So yeah, so that's it guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I try to include books that aren't really talked about on BookTube, so they would be a little bit, you get my more diverse selection. So yeah, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye guys!